To begin making my coil pot, first I need to start with a base. So for that, I'm going to create a slab of clay. So I have my little cube of clay here. It doesn't need to be perfect, and I just need to flatten it out. So I'm going to use the palms of my hands because I find that it's really effective. You could use a roller if you wanted to. It doesn't really matter. It's your personal preference. If you're using the heels of your hands, then you're just going to press it down and try to make sure that it's even, and every so often flip it over to the other side. It's going to ensure that it's pretty even all the way through. When you have a good base, a good slab here, should be about maybe a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch thick, then I'm going to take one of our little glaze containers here. I'm just going to put it on here, and then I'm going to use one of my little wooden dowels to sort of trace around it, pressing all the way down to the canvas. Once I've traced all the way around it, I can pull this off, and I have a fantastic little base for my coil pot. At this point, I can start making the coils for my pot. So I'm just going to take my scraps. I could take another little piece of clay here, and I'm just going to put them into one solid piece, and then I'm going to start rolling them. If you notice, I'm not rolling on the canvas, because if I roll on the canvas is going to move. So I like to roll it on the table. And if you notice that one side of your clay becomes a little bit thicker than the other side, then that just means that you have to start rolling on that side to make it even. So every once in a while, lift your hand up, try to see where it's the thickest, and try to make the entire thing pretty even. All right, and this starts happening where one side is a little bit thicker than the other. Then I can just stop for a second, even it out, and then keep rolling. All right, and I'm going to keep going until this thing is pretty even and about maybe as thin as, say, my pinky. Okay, and then when I have a pretty even coil here, then I can start the process for attaching. All right, to attach this to my base, I'm just going to flatten out one end of my coil a little bit. Actually, the other end I'm going to flatten out also. That'll be my start and end points. But before I attach it, I actually have to do my 3 S's. If I want this thing to stay together, I have to make sure that I score it, I slip it, and I stick it. So using a fork, I'm just going to sort of scratch the surface where I plan to stick it to my base. And I'm going to go all the way around. And I like to use a fork just because it's faster than using a wooden dowel. And then I'm also going to score the entire side of my coil. So I'm just sort of scratching it lightly. If I skip this step, then there's a good chance that my coil pot could start to fall apart later on. And I don't want that to happen. All right, once it's nice and scratched up there, my scoring step is done. And my next step is that I need slip. So slip is just a mixture of clay and water. It's kind of a soupy clay, and it just helps the 2 pieces to stick together. So with my paintbrush here, I'm just going to take this mixture and put it right over those scratches. I don't want to smooth out those scratches. Those scratches should stay there, but I'm just going to fill them in a little bit, like this, and then that step is done. So I've scratched it or scored it, and then I've also slipped it, and now I'm going to stick it. So putting the scratch surface down to touch the scratch surface here, I'm going to slowly put it around in a circle until I get here. Now if you notice, this surface now isn't scored. So if that happens to you, that means you've got to take a break for a second, score that surface as well, then slip that surface so they do stick together, and then you can continue with the process. It's definitely not something that you want to skip. Okay. All right. and then I just attach it, so I'm sticking it there. So again, my 3 S's were score, slip, and stick. Now that I'm finished with this layer here, then I can look at it, smooth out any parts that have cracks with a wet finger. And then I can go ahead and roll out another piece for the next step of my clay so that I can keep building upon it.